Hi, and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Jean Farish, and I am so glad to be here with you again today. I have a short list, but a very deep list of things to talk about. I'm going to start with an inspiration that I got after creating last week's episode, and that is to start another stitch along for America, Land That We Love. This one, a lot more proactive or more involved stitch along than the one I started years ago. So here's the deal. We're actually going to start next Saturday, which is 9/11, the anniversary of the 9/11 tragedy 20 years ago. So that's going to be our start date. And the objective is to finish it within the year. It's a big piece, but the way we're going to tackle this is to treat the banner of America as one project. And frankly, that will be the most time-consuming part of it. If you can get that done in a week, that'll be great. If not, again, this is going to be a guideline, an objective. And then after that, if we do one state a week, that'll take us 51 weeks. And then the last week, week number 52, we will do the Land That We Love banner at the bottom, as well as the personalization squares that are near the bottom. Before I get into the details, let me just say that if you stitched this already, but would like to be a part of it and stitch it again, I hope that you will feel welcome to do so. Or maybe you like the idea, but the piece doesn't really fit with your decor or whatever. Consider stitching along with us and then donating the finished results to a school or a public building, your city hall, a fire station, a public safety building, wherever you think that it would be appropriate and and frankly, that your work will be appreciated. So do think about that. Okay, here's how it's going to work. We're going to start next Saturday. If this is too short of a notice, please know that you can jump in and join at any time. It's not like, the door's going to be closed, as of Saturday at midnight or whatever. So we're going to start on 9/11, and many of you already have the chart. I've heard from a number of people who have had it since the 80s and just not stitched it. And there are a lot of different versions out there. There's a kit that was produced by the Jan Lin Company. It was part of my my jeanfarish.com website. Wow, now I have to get into that, don't I? Well, I don't really have to, but I don't want you typing in jeanfarish.com and thinking you're going to find me. I made the mistake of letting the ownership of that name, even though it's my name, I let it lapse. And the last time I looked, it was for sale for like $20,000, which I am not paying to get my own name. So that's why my website now is jeanfarishneedleworks.com. And I have vowed to not ever let that lapse. Anyway, back in the 2000s, it was part of that website. So some people downloaded and printed from that. So that's a different version. Now, I've also heard from some people who say, I like the idea of a PDF, but I don't have a printer at home. You may not be aware of this, but you can actually email the file to a company like Office Max or some FedEx stores or whatever, anybody who has a print service, and they will print it for you, and then you can just go by and pick it up, which is kind of nice. And of course, many of us have become accustomed just working from the PDF on our tablets, or some people even on their phones. It's not compatible with Pattern Keeper. I know several months ago I said I was going to look into that and figure out how to make my files compatible with that app, and I just haven't done it. I am able to download it just using Adobe, which is free. It doesn't count my stitches for me. It doesn't tell me what percentage I'm done. I can live without those bells and whistles. So that is a free option for you. It's just to work from your tablet or your phone. Okay, and I've gotten off my own track of telling you how to get involved. I'm not going to assume that everybody who owns this chart wants to be a part of the stitch along. Not at all. So to be a part of the Stitch Along and be a part of the Zoom gatherings, which we will have once a month, starting on 9/11, in order to be a part of that, you have to send me an email. Please don't think that you can just comment here on YouTube. That isn't going to work. You need to send me an email so that I have a legitimate email address for you and I don't have to worry about something being mistyped or whatever. And again, don't say to yourself, well, I will be careful and put it in your comment. Frankly, given what I have on my plate this coming week, I don't have time to do that. So again, the only way to be a part of the Zoom gatherings and therefore a part of the Stitch Along is to send me an email to jeanfarish@gmail.com. Give me your first and last name. It's not always apparent by looking at your email address. And simply put, you can just put the initials. You know what? I write it all the time, but I can't. It's like I can't say it. You can just put America Land We Love, or you can just put the initials ALTWL Stitch Along or SAL in the subject line, and I will know that that's what you're writing me about. And then I can just capture your email address from that. And it's not going to be today or tomorrow or whatever, but later on this week, well before Saturday, I will have it all downloaded into a single file, and I will send everybody an email with a Zoom invitation. Now, I imagine that Zoom gathering is going to be pretty big. Already I have over 50 people that are signed up just through doing it through my Facebook. So be aware that the first time is going to be pretty much information sharing. I will be happy to answer questions, but it's not going to be as much of a social dialogue as we might have if we had a smaller group. So I hope that doesn't put you off, but I just want to let you know up front what to expect next week. So anyway, again, I want this to be as stress-free as possible, although I'm hearing myself saying all this too and saying maybe that's creating a stress for some people. But I just want you to relax and know that you can participate even if you don't have all the colors to start with. We're going to be doing just, the America banner, which is only 3 colors. Well, actually 4 with the backstitching. And then the first 3 states. And that'll be the first month. So anyway, that's what's going on with that. I have decided to stitch from stash. And so I found a piece of legacy linen that's big enough. It's America Land That We Love. It's a big piece. So I am working. This is 15 stitches to the inch, and I am quite comfortable stitching with just 2 inches on all sides. And I wrote down how big all right, I just dropped everything. Hold on a second. Never do I feel my age more than when I drop something. Getting down is easy. It's getting back up that's the challenge. Anyway, so I made myself a little note here. I cut this 18 by 27, and that's going to allow me 2 inches all the way around on 30 count linen over 2. Now in the in the episode description today, I will include information on how big to cut your fabric for a variety of counts. And I will list it based on allowing 3 inches on all sides, because I know that makes most people comfortable. And of course, if you want to figure out how to big to cut it yourself, in one of my previous episodes, I went over that in great detail. So what else do I need to tell you? Oh, this piece can be stitched on Aida, even weave, or linen. It works for any of them. There are no, I shouldn't say there are no partial stitches. There are only a few. Like the horse's ears are 3/4 stitches. And there's just a couple places like that, but there are no specialty stitches. So, yeah, so we'll have a monthly Zoom gathering just to share our progress and to kind of encourage each other and to pat ourselves on the back and see if anybody has any questions or issues that have come up. And yeah, so I'm real excited about this. Oh, I do have to go back to one thing. When you send me that email that says that you want to participate, I need your first and last name. I will automatically have your email address because you'll be sending me an email. I also need to know the source of your chart. Basically, which version it is. Is it the Jan Lynn kit? Is it my original publication? Is it from the website? Is it from my Etsy store? You have to include that. Now, the people who have been emailing me in the past week, people who heard about this through my Facebook group, if they didn't include that information, I have sent them a reply asking them for the information. I'm just going to be upfront with you. Given what I have going on this week, I am not going to be able to do that. So if you don't include all that information, I'm just going to scroll on by. And then after I get back from the Great Parks trip, and I've got a little bit more time, it's going to be the beginning of October before that happens. That's when I will go back to those other emails and try to get the missing information. So, you know, I hate to be so specific and kind of narrow about this, but I'm just being realistic with the time that I have. Because on the 17th of this month, no, the 16th, the Work of the Hands retreat starts here in Winston-Salem. Terry Bay and I are teaching for that group. And then I have just about 24 hours to pack and get ready to get on the plane to go out to the Southwest where the Great Parks trip is going to begin. So I'm really excited about all that. So, yeah, I usually take the time to answer every question and every email. I just know that these next couple weeks, I'm just not going to be able to do that. With my mention of Work of the Hands makes me think about other upcoming teaching and learning opportunities. And there are a couple of cruises that I want to mention. In February, we have the February of 2022. There's an Asia cruise that I'm participating in. And I keep jumping around in my decisions about what to teach. And this week, I finally made the commitment of what I'm going to be teaching. And I've decided to teach Roxy, even though that was already a stitch along, and I've got video instruction to go along with it. A lot of people learn best just, you know, face-to-face, in person. So I'm going to offer Roxy. I'm also going to offer the Melbourne sampler. And in this class, there's really a lot to teach. We're going to learn this delicate little pulled thread stitch with a four-sided. We're going to learn the satin stitch. This wonderful little stitch called the interlaced cross. The big star, though, is learning how to do the drawn thread, creating these this delicate openness, and then how to manipulate that area to create this design. And then another pull thread stitch here, as well as just some other stitches like the long arm cross stitch. So that's one of the classes that I'm going to be teaching. On all of the cruises, whether they're ones that I organize myself under the kind of brand name of Stitcher's Escapes, or this Asia cruise, which is being organized by the guys at RGE Travels, I try to offer classes that are both in counted thread and in needlepoint. There's a lot of crossover, there's a lot of similarities, and we talk about that quite a bit when I get the opportunity to do so. And this is one of the classes I'm going to be teaching, is a medallion Bargello. These, of course, I haven't done anything with them. I'm probably going to be making them into a tray. They're really great for pillows, etc. So this is the pomegranate colorway, and this is the sweetheart colorway. But the cool thing about this one is when you flip it upside down, that's when you see these hearts that are not quite as apparent when you're taking the exact same design and holding it this way. That's one of the things I love about Bargello, is that by simply changing the colors, they look so different, as well as the just the way you orient the canvas. Bargello is a great introduction to needlepoint for anyone, but I think particularly for people who are used to doing counted thread. It's a simple stitch. It's just each one of these stitches is just straight up and down over 4 threads. And for those of you who are used to stitching on linen, you see that the canvas is very similar to linen. It's also, I like Bargello because once you establish the pattern, then it's a lot of repeat work. And yeah, so this is one of the classes I'll be teaching. So I've got Roxy, I've got the pair of Bargello classes, Melbourne. So that's February 2022. And then in July of 2022, we have the British Isles cruise. Now this one is already full. It filled very quickly because this is the itinerary that we had to cancel in 2020. So of course the people who got bumped off of that cruise, we gave them kind of first dibs on the 2022 cruise. So it's full. We do keep a wait list, and we don't ever wish that somebody can't come on the cruise, but cancellations do happen. And so if you're interested, I would say get on the wait list. There's always a chance that you'll find a spot on the cruise. So, and then in September of 2022, we're going to do a one-way cruise from Vancouver, British Columbia to Hawaii. And what's really going to be fabulous about that cruise is that there's 5 days at sea, which for those of you who are new to cruising, that basically means you're on the ship, you're going from point A to point B, and you're not stopping at any one of the ports of call. And so that makes it just the perfect setup for classes and for casual stitching. Now, I'm going to be joined on that cruise by 2 needlepoint teachers, Kathy Reese and Tony Gerdes. And we will also have a second counted thread teacher, and that's Terry Bay. So the 4 of us are going to be offering classes throughout those 5 days in both counted thread and needlepoint. So it's just going to be a really fabulous cruise. So again, well, I shouldn't make it sound like the 5 days is all there is to it. Then we get to Hawaii and we get to cruise around the islands, and we will continue with time for casual stitching and whatnot, but there'll be a lot of sightseeing going on too. I'll put the information in today's episode description about where you can get the details, where to register, etc. It's time for another sort of cross-stitch primer snippet, I'm calling them. And today what I want to talk about is how to prepare your fabric for stitching. Primarily what we have to do is pay attention to the edges because they will fray over time. If you are stitching a very small project and it's only taking you a couple of days, no big deal. But if it's something that's going to take weeks or months, you will find that it will start fraying over time. And that can be a problem. So there are a couple of basic ways to prepare your fabric for stitching. And I'm going to talk about the methods that I think that are the safest and the easiest for you. The first method I'm going to show you is just simply sealing the edges with a product called Fray Check. And this is very, very easy to use. You can see that it's a clear liquid. I usually put a scrap piece of paper or something under the edge. This just happens to be the sheet from a page of labels that I recently printed. And I can simply run a bead of the Fray Check along the edges. It doesn't have to be a particularly wide area that I'm doing, and just go all the way around all 4 sides. And you can either let it air dry, or if you happen to be in a hurry, you can use a hair dryer to get it to dry. I wouldn't dry it with an iron. I don't think that would probably be good for your iron. However, once it is dried and sealed, it's perfectly safe to wash it, iron it, whatever. So you can see where that edge is a little bit darker, and that's going to dry clear. So that's one method. And frankly, for a long time, that's how I did all of my edges. Another method of protecting the edges is to hand sew it with an overcast stitch. Take small stitches, and each time you're basically wrapping your working thread around the edge of the fabric, which will keep it from fraying. I'm stitching mine in a fairly regular manner here, every other Aida square. It doesn't really have to be quite this pretty. It can be functional even if the stitches are irregular, but somehow when I'm working on Aida, I just can't help myself. I need to use those little holes as a guide and just keep my stitches looking neat and pretty. If you have a sewing machine, you can do the same thing with a zigzag stitch, or if you have a serger, that's effective also. So those are my 4 favorite ways to edge your fabric. By hand with a whip stitch, using a product like Fray Check. If you have a sewing machine or a serger, then zigzagging the edges or serging the edges. I find those to be the most effective and easiest ways to protect the edges of fabric from fraying. Last week, I showed you my framed kindness sampler and told you that although the framer did exactly what I asked him to do, when I brought it home, I was just, I was unimpressed. It just didn't have that little, I don't know how to define it, that little punch, that little pop or whatever. And so I went to the framer, and let me show you a couple of the ways that I thought of fixing it. And after looking at both the sort of mossy green undermat and the purple undermat, I decided on the purple, and this is what it looks like now. I am so pleased with this. It's just a totally different piece. Now, let me just share with you that, of course, it took some time, you know, and you always have to consider that. It cost, I think, about $10 for the second mat, and maybe about $8 for the labor. I certainly didn't expect the framer to undo it and cut the mat and re-put it and put it back together again at no charge. But I feel like that for $18, it was a good expense to be able to get something that I am really, really pleased with. While I was at the framer and we took it apart, I realized that it also gave me an opportunity to best demonstrate something I have mentioned several times with you. And since a picture's worth 1,000 words here, I took a photograph of it while I was at the frame shop. So let me see now if I can just kind of talk you through and tell you what it is that you're seeing. I've often said that you don't have to have your fabric going all the way to the edges of the frame. Like this one, my fabric is not going all the way underneath the edges of this mat in all directions. For a piece like this, it would have more than doubled my fabric cost. So this is what it looks like when kind of behind the scenes. And I've never been able to have a photograph to actually show people how it is that I have my framer work with my smaller piece. So basically they build out the acid-free foam core around the 4 edges that are, so it's underneath the mat. So I have a solid surface for the mat to rest on, but it's not linen covered acid-free foam core. It's foam board that's kind of naked, and it doesn't need to be covered in fabric. It's just going to be covered by a mat. So that's why I am not as adamant about the you have to have 3 inches on all sides sort of rule. And some people who would say that for a piece like this, I would have had to have cut it large enough to go underneath the edge of the mat and wrap it around the board to be pinned or laced. And again, I just don't ascribe to that theory. I think it's a waste of money. So I'm glad I had a chance to really show you what this piece looked like underneath the mat. And the last thing to show you today is how beautifully this piece ended up after being soaked for 24 hours in the solution from last week. So it's absolutely pristine now after soaking in that retro wash solution. So I am just really pleased with it, and I'm ready to remount it and frame it. So in order to reframe this, what I've done is had a second piece of foam, acid-free foam board cut, the exact same dimensions as the original. I don't like to reuse the piece simply because after pinning around the edges, I find the next set of pins don't hold quite as well. Now I'll be able to use that piece of foam board for something else. I'll just cut it into a smaller piece and it will be useful. It's just that inch or so around the edges that's kind of riddled with holes at this point. So I like starting with a fresh piece of foam board. Now I had the dimensions cut exactly the same because you might remember that I pointed out how I had pulled a thread on this piece as a way of marking where I was going to fold the piece around the edge of the foam board. I don't do this any longer, and there are several reasons why. Mainly because at this point, I don't have any choice of framing it differently because I've got this missing thread in all directions. I mentioned last week that this piece has quite a story behind it, so I think I will take the time to kind of share it with you now. This piece is the direct result of a game I played with my kids in the car. Some of you, especially those of you who are kind of in my age range, will remember back in the day when we went on long car trips. We didn't have a lot to entertain ourselves with. And so we would play the alphabet game. And it has lots of different versions. I'm going on a picnic and I'm going to bring an apple. And the next person says, I'm going on a picnic and I'm going to bring an apple and a banana. And the next person says, I'm going on a picnic and I'm going to bring an apple, a banana, and a carrot. And so I played that game with my kids, Catherine and Elizabeth. And at the time, I want to say they were about 8 and 10 years old. And we were driving from New Jersey to Rockholm Gardens in Illinois. And so, you know, again, there were no video games. There was, you know, it was coloring books and card games and playing these kinds of games with mom. I was a single mom, and so was doing all the driving myself, and the kids were in their car seats in the back seat. And so after a while, I said, you know what, let's play the alphabet game, but let's have a theme. Let's pick things that are kind of old-fashioned, sort of down-home, comfortable things. I mean, we're driving through Amish country, we're driving through some gorgeous farmland and whatnot. So I said, let's be inspired by that and have a theme. And Catherine, being the older one, was tasked with the job of starting a list. And so we started thinking of as many things we could that would fit that category for each letter of the alphabet. And many of them we had multiple choices, multiple things listed. And some of the letters were a little bit more of a challenge, like typically like the X. I mean, what are you going to do with X? Except that I did X stitching. So by the time we got to Rockholm Gardens, I had the outline for this piece, and I started eliminating some of them and trying to make sure that there wasn't a lot of duplication, and something like, okay, we had blueberry for B, but I didn't want to just make you know, little round blueberry colored things, so I came up with the idea of blueberry pies. And so that's how this piece came about, was a road trip game with my kids on our way to for me to teach at Rockholm Gardens back in the 80s. And it's you you know, so it really has a special history for me, a special place in my heart of remembering that trip with my kids so long ago. So now right now this is out of print, and I am busy charting it so that I can create a PDF and get it in my Etsy store. So when I mentioned earlier that these coming weeks were incredibly busy for me, this is one of the projects that I am really itching to get done. I feel like it's may not be the most, I don't know, there are so many modern trends in needlework which are wonderful, and they appeal to a much wider audience than the audience I was designing for when I first started in 1981. And I'm glad for that. But I also feel like that there's a place for this type of a design even now. So especially with that whole country chic thing, that is still a strong trend in home deck, the whole beaded board and, you know, wire baskets and all that kind of stuff. And even now, when I take a look at this piece, there's some parts of this that just really speak to me. I was really pleased with how the mason jars turned out, and the little quilted hearts. Anyway, it was fun, and it also reminded me a lot of things in my own upbringing. We had a wooden ice cream maker like this growing up, and it was quite a treat when my dad would get that out, and you would pack it with ice and rock salt, and my mom would mix up the ice cream mixture. And I'm going to tell you what, there's no better ice cream in the world than one that's made like that. Anyway, yeah, so this piece just, I don't know, it's one of my favorites. I can't wait to get it recharted and in my Etsy store. So I've got a busy week ahead. I'm sure that you do too. And I hope that whatever you're doing, wherever you are, you can stitch happy and stay safe. And I'll see you next week.